Welcome back to Craziest HOA Moments. She said appeal denied, and I said show me the record. You are not allowed to do that without a permit. Laura Hall stood 3 feet from my driveway with her portable folding sign stand planted between us like a barricade. Her gray pixie cut barely moved in the humid, eerie heat. I had just asked to see the HOA audit log. Karen screamed that the audit log was confidential and she would punish me for asking. Her voice cracked on the last word. I held my phone low, screen turned away, recording everything. A teen on a bike braked hard at the curb and stopped to watch. I work nights managing a car rental lot. I cannot afford missed shifts. I moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago because the rent was reasonable and the lease said the HOA covered lawn maintenance. That was the pitch. Reality was different. The Silverleaf Records Compliance Association had a reputation for rules I did not learn about until after I signed. Laura Hall was the vendor coordinator. She threatened contractors and service techs who did not follow her interpretation of policy. I learned that the hard way when she tried to fine me for parking my own car in my own driveway overnight. The first violation notice appeared on my door 3 weeks after I moved in. It was a laminated notice template with blank spaces Laura filled in by hand. No readable text, but the handwriting was unmistakable. The violation: unauthorized overnight vehicle storage. My car. In my driveway. I called the management company. They told me Laura was handling enforcement and I should work it out with her. I tried. Laura told me the rules were the rules and this conversation is not a debate, it is a directive. That was the first time I heard that line. I paid the $50 fine because I was still on probation at work and could not risk drama. That was my mistake. Paying once told her I would pay again. 2 weeks later, another notice. This time for a trash bin visible from the street. I had pulled it to the curb on collection day like everyone else. Laura left the notice on my door at 6 in the morning. I was asleep. By the time I woke up, the bin was already back in my garage, but the fine stood. $75. I started asking neighbors. That was when I learned about the previous owner. A neighbor named Marcus told me quietly over the fence one afternoon. He said the previous homeowner fought the HOA and then moved suddenly, packed up in the middle of the night, no forwarding address. Marcus said the guy had a tow truck violation. The HOA claimed he parked in a fire lane. The guy said he was in a guest spot. Either way, the tow company hauled his truck at 2 in the morning. The bill was $600. He disputed it. Laura escalated. Fines piled up. The HOA filed a lien. 3 months later, he was gone. That story stuck with me. Something about it did not add up. Fire lanes are marked. Guest spots are not fire lanes. I started looking at the paperwork I had received. Every notice used the same laminated template Laura filled in by hand. No printed forms, no official letterhead. Just Laura's handwriting and a stamp that said Silverleaf Records Compliance Association. I took pictures of every notice. My phone storage was almost full, and I had to back up video evidence before it got lost, so I bought a cloud subscription that night. The next morning, I filed a records request with the management company. I wanted to see the enforcement log, the violation history for my address, and the minutes from the board meeting where my fines were approved. The management company said they would forward my request to the board. Laura called me that afternoon. She said records requests had to go through her first. I said I already submitted the request through the management company. She said that was not the proper procedure. I asked what the proper procedure was. She said I needed to submit a written request on the approved form. I asked where I could find the approved form. She said she would email it to me. She never did. I waited a week. No form, no response. I called the management company again. They said Laura told them I had not submitted the proper documentation. I said I was never given the proper documentation. They said they would follow up. Another week passed. Nothing. I checked the HOA group chat. Laura had posted a message painting me as a repeat offender from a past case. She did not name me directly, but she described my address and said some residents refused to follow the rules and slow down the enforcement process for everyone. Neighbors started commenting. A few people liked the post. One person asked if the board was taking action. Laura replied that the board was reviewing the situation and that collections might be necessary. I was building a case for a refinance and the lien threats could derail it overnight. I could not let this sit. I drove to the city clerk's office the next morning before my shift. I needed to know what documents were public record. The clerk, an older woman named Diane, explained that HOA meeting minutes, budgets, and enforcement logs were usually accessible to homeowners under state law. She said I could file a formal complaint with the state if the HOA refused to provide them. She also said I should document every refusal in writing. I thanked her and left. That night, I sent Laura another email. I kept it short. I requested the audit log, the enforcement log for my address, and the minutes from the last 6 board meetings. I copied the management company and the board president. I hit send and waited. Laura replied within an hour. She said the audit log was confidential and contained sensitive financial information that could not be disclosed without board approval. She said enforcement logs were maintained internally and were not subject to homeowner review. She said meeting minutes were available on request but required a processing fee of $25 per document. She said if I continued to harass the board, she would escalate the matter to collections. I screenshotted the email and saved it to the cloud. The next morning, I found another notice on my door, this time for a lawn violation. My grass was too long. It was not. I had mowed it 3 days earlier. I took pictures of my lawn and the lawns of my neighbors. Mine was shorter than half the street. I took the notice with me and drove to the management company office. I asked to speak to someone about enforcement procedures. The receptionist said the board handled enforcement and I should contact Laura. I said I had already contacted Laura and she was not providing the records I requested. The receptionist said she could not help me and suggested I attend the next board meeting. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. I cleared my shift and showed up early. The meeting was held in the clubhouse near the neighborhood entrance. Laura was already there setting up. She had her portable folding sign stand with her. She placed it near the door with a printed agenda clipped to it. No readable text, but the layout was identical to the notices she had been leaving on my door. I signed in and took a seat in the back. About 15 people showed up. Most were board members or regular attendees. A few neighbors sat near the front. The meeting started with standard business, budget updates, landscaping contract renewal, pool maintenance schedule. I waited. Finally, the board president called for new business. I raised my hand. Laura saw me and her expression tightened. The president acknowledged me. I stood and said I had submitted multiple records requests and had not received a response. I said I was entitled to see the enforcement log and the meeting minutes under state law. Laura stood before the president could respond. She said my requests were frivolous and designed to slow down enforcement. She said I was a problem resident and the board should consider stronger action. I did not argue, because I already had something in my pocket she did not know about. I waited for her to finish. Then I asked the president directly if the HOA had a policy prohibiting homeowners from accessing meeting minutes. The president hesitated. He looked at Laura. She said the policy was under review. I asked when the policy was adopted. She said it was adopted at the last board meeting. I asked if I could see the minutes from that meeting. She said the minutes were not finalized yet. I asked when they would be finalized. She said that was not my concern. The room was silent. One of the board members, a man in his 60s, cleared his throat and said the board should table the discussion until the next meeting. Laura objected. She said the board needed to act now before the situation escalated further. The board member repeated his motion to table. Another board member seconded. The president called for a vote. 3 in favor, 2 against. The motion passed. Laura sat down hard and crossed her arms. I stayed calm. I had what I needed. The board had just admitted on the record that the policy Laura was citing did not exist yet. After the meeting, I approached the board president in the parking lot. I asked him if he could clarify the records request process. He looked uncomfortable. He said Laura handled most of the administrative work and he trusted her judgment. I asked if he had reviewed the enforcement log recently. He said he had not. I asked if he knew about the previous owner who left suddenly. He frowned. He said he remembered the situation but did not recall the details. I asked if the board had reviewed the tow authorization before the truck was hauled. He said he assumed Laura had handled it properly. I thanked him and left. That weekend, I did a deeper dive. I pulled up the HOA portal and tried to access the archived meeting minutes. Most of them were locked behind a login I did not have credentials for. I called Diane at the city clerk's office again. She told me that if the HOA was incorporated, the incorporation documents and bylaws should be on file with the state. I looked it up. The bylaws were there. I downloaded them and read through the enforcement section. The bylaws required board approval for any fine over $50. They also required written notice at least 7 days before a lien could be filed. I checked my notices. None of them mentioned board approval. None of them mentioned a lien timeline. They were all just Laura's handwritten entries on a laminated template. I went back to Marcus and asked him if he still had any paperwork from the previous owner. He said no, but he remembered the guy's name. I searched online. I found a forum post from 2 years ago. The previous owner had posted a warning about the HOA. He said they fabricated a tow violation and refused to provide the authorization paperwork. He said he requested the dispatch log from the tow company and it showed the call came from Laura's personal cell phone. He said he tried to fight it, but the HOA filed a lien and he could not refinance. He sold at a loss and moved. The post had 3 replies. All of them were from people in other neighborhoods saying they had similar experiences with HOAs. I screenshotted the post. Then I called the tow company. I asked if they kept records of dispatch calls. The operator said yes, but they only released records to the account holder or law enforcement. I asked how long they kept records. She said 3 years. I asked if there was a way to request records as a homeowner affected by a disputed tow. She said I could file a request in writing and include a copy of the police report if one was filed. I hung up and thought. I needed a police report. I did not have one, but the previous owner might have. I tracked down the previous owner through property records and found a phone number. I called. He answered on the 3rd ring. I explained who I was and what was happening. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he filed a police report when the tow happened. He said the deputy took his statement but told him it was a civil matter and he should work it out with the HOA. He said he never heard back. I asked if he still had the incident number. He said he would look for it and call me back. He called me 2 hours later. He had the number. I wrote it down and thanked him. That was the trump card. A police incident number from a prior HOA trespass attempt that shows a pattern. Monday morning, I filed a formal records complaint with the State Consumer Protection Office. I attached the previous owner's forum post, the screenshots of Laura's emails, the HOA bylaws, and the police incident number. I explained that the HOA was threatening to send collections even though the fees were disputed and under appeal. I explained that the enforcement actions appeared to be unauthorized and targeted. I requested an investigation. The form said I would receive a response within 30 days. I saved the confirmation email. That afternoon, Laura called me. She did not introduce herself. She just said I was playing a dangerous game and the board had authorized her to proceed with collections. I said the fees were disputed and the board had voted to table the discussion at the last meeting. She said that vote did not apply to existing violations. I said I had requested records and she had not provided them. She said I was not entitled to confidential financial information. I said the enforcement log was not confidential under the HOA bylaws. She hung up. The next morning, I found a new notice on my door. This time it was for an unapproved exterior modification. I had replaced a broken porch light fixture. The notice said I needed architectural approval before making changes. I checked the bylaws. Porch light replacement was listed as a minor repair that did not require approval. I took a picture of the notice in the bylaw section. Then I drove to the management company office again. This time I asked to speak to the manager. The receptionist said the manager was not available. I said I would wait. I sat in the lobby for 40 minutes. The manager finally came out. I handed her copies of the notices, the emails, and the bylaw sections. I said Laura was issuing violations that contradicted the HOA's own rules. The manager said she would review the documents and get back to me. She never did. Instead, I got another call from Laura. She said the manager had forwarded my complaint to the board and the board had decided to proceed with enforcement. She said if I did not pay the outstanding fines within 7 days, the HOA would file a lien. I asked how much the fines totaled. She said $850. I asked for an itemized invoice. She said she would mail it. I said I wanted it emailed. She said the HOA did not email invoices. I said I would be disputing the charges. She said that was my right, but the lien would proceed regardless. Then she added, "We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." I hung up and called Diane at the city clerk's office. I asked if there was a way to block an HOA lien while a complaint was under review. She said I could file a motion in small claims court, but it would require a filing fee and I would need to show evidence of harm. I asked what counted as harm. She said financial harm, harassment, or procedural violations. I said I had all three. She said I should consult an attorney. I did not have money for an attorney. I had video evidence, screenshots, and a police incident number. That was going to have to be enough. That night, I got a message in the neighborhood group chat. Someone had posted a photo of my house with a caption saying, "This is what happens when residents refuse to follow the rules." The photo showed my car in the driveway. Laura commented below, "Enforcement in progress." I screenshotted it and added it to the cloud folder. Then I replied in the chat. I said I had been requesting records for weeks and the HOA had refused to provide them. I said I had filed a formal complaint with the state and I was happy to share my documentation with anyone who wanted to see it. The chat went silent. The next morning, I checked my doorbell camera. Laura had been on my property at 6 in the morning taking photos. I watched the footage. She circled my driveway, photographed my car from 3 angles, and then walked up to my porch and inspected the new light fixture. She did not knock. She did not leave a notice. She just took pictures and left. I clipped the video and saved it. Then I called the non-emergency police line. I asked if photographing someone's property without permission was trespassing. The dispatcher said it depended on the circumstances. She said if I felt harassed, I could file a report. I said I would think about it. I did not have to think long. That afternoon, a tow truck pulled up in front of my house. The driver got out and started hooking up my car. I ran outside. I asked what he was doing. He said he had an authorization to tow a vehicle in violation of HOA parking rules. I said my car was in my own driveway. He shrugged and said he just followed the dispatch orders. I asked to see the authorization. He pulled out a printed form with no readable text. It had Laura's signature at the bottom. I took a picture of it. Then I called the police. The deputy arrived 15 minutes later. By then, the tow truck driver had my car half hooked. The deputy asked what was going on. I explained the situation. I showed him my lease, the HOA bylaws, and the screenshots of Laura's emails. The deputy looked at the tow authorization. He asked the driver who called in the order. The driver said it came from the HOA vendor coordinator. The deputy asked if there was a violation on file. The driver said he did not know, he just got the call. The deputy told him to unhook the car. The driver hesitated. The deputy repeated the order. The driver unhooked my car and left. The deputy took my statement. I gave him the incident number from the previous owner's case. I explained the pattern. The deputy wrote everything down. He said it sounded like a civil dispute, but the trespassing and harassment could be criminal. He said he would file a report and forward it to the HOA investigator. I asked if there was an HOA investigator. He said no, but he would flag it for follow-up. I thanked him. He left. I went back inside and added the tow authorization photo and the deputy's card to the cloud folder. That night, Laura called again. She said the tow company had reported that I interfered with a lawful repossession. I said it was not a repossession, it was an unauthorized tow. She said the HOA had the authority to tow vehicles in violation of parking rules. I said my car was not in violation. She said that was not for me to decide. I said I had a deputy's report that said otherwise. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said the board would be reviewing my conduct at the next meeting. I said I looked forward to it. She hung up. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA revenge content. The next board meeting was 3 weeks away. I used the time to organize my evidence. I created a timeline of every violation notice, every email, every phone call, and every tow attempt. I included the police incident number from the previous owner, the doorbell camera footage of Laura trespassing, the screenshots of the group chat, and the tow authorization. I printed everything and put it in a tabbed evidence binder. I also filed a second records request with the management company. This time I requested the vendor contract between the HOA and the tow company. I wanted to see who authorized the relationship and how much Laura was getting paid to coordinate it. The management company replied 2 days later. They said the vendor contract was a board-level document and required board approval to release. I replied that the bylaws did not specify board approval for vendor contracts. I said I was entitled to see any contract paid for with HOA funds. They did not respond. I forwarded the exchange to the State Consumer Protection Office and updated my complaint. The state replied with a case number and said an investigator would be in touch. A week before the meeting, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was the investigator from the state. She said she had reviewed my complaint and the attached documentation. She said the HOA appeared to be violating multiple sections of the state HOA statute. She said she would be attending the next board meeting as an observer. She asked if I planned to present my evidence. I said yes. She said she looked forward to it. I asked if her presence would be announced. She said no, she would be there as a member of the public. I thanked her and hung up. The morning of the meeting, I ran through my timeline one more time. I had everything I needed: the evidence binder, the video clips, the police incident number, the tow authorization, the email screenshots, the doorbell footage, the group chat posts. I had even printed a copy of the forum post from the previous owner. I did not know if the board would let me present it all, but I was ready to try. I arrived at the clubhouse early. Laura was already there with her portable folding sign stand. She saw me walk in and her expression hardened. I signed in and took a seat in the front row this time. A few neighbors filtered in. One of them, a woman I recognized from the group chat, sat next to me and whispered good luck. I nodded. The room filled up slowly. By the time the meeting started, there were about 20 people present. I noticed a woman in her 50s sitting in the back corner with a notebook. I guess that was the investigator. The board president called the meeting to order. He ran through the standard agenda items: budget report, maintenance updates, landscaping bids. Then he called for new business. I raised my hand. He looked at Laura. She stood and said the board had scheduled time to address my violations and conduct. The president nodded and said I could present my case. I stood and opened the evidence binder. I started with the timeline. I explained that I had received 6 violation notices in 6 months. I explained that none of the notices cited board approval as required by the bylaws. I explained that I had requested records multiple times and been refused. I explained that the refusals contradicted the HOA's own policies and state law. I held up the email screenshots. The room was silent. The board president shifted in his chair. Laura raised her hand to speak. I kept going. I explained that Laura had trespassed on my property to take photos without notice or permission. I held up the doorbell camera footage printed as stills. I explained that she had authorized a tow of my car from my own driveway without board approval. I held up the tow authorization with her signature. I explained that the previous owner had experienced the same pattern and had filed a police report. I held up the incident number. Laura stood and said I was making false accusations. I said everything I was presenting was documented and time-stamped. The board president told Laura to sit down. She did not. She said this conversation is not a debate, it is a directive. One of the board members laughed. Laura turned and glared at him. I continued. I explained that I had filed a complaint with the State Consumer Protection Office. I explained that an investigator was reviewing the HOA's enforcement practices. I said I was requesting that the board remove the enforcement action and void the ledger entry for all disputed fines. I said I was also requesting that the board review Laura's authority to issue violations and authorize tows without oversight. The room was dead silent. The board president looked at Laura. She was red-faced and shaking. He asked if she wanted to respond. She said I was a liar and the board should expel me from the meeting. The board president said that was not how meetings worked. He asked the other board members for input. One of the board members, the man who had laughed earlier, said he had concerns about the enforcement procedures. He said he had not been aware that Laura was issuing violations without board review. He said he wanted to see the enforcement log. Laura said the log was confidential. The board member said it was a board document and he was on the board. Laura said she would provide it at the next meeting. The board member said he wanted it now. Laura said she did not have it with her. The board member said that was convenient. The board president called for a 5-minute recess. I stayed in my seat. Laura stormed out of the room. The investigator in the back corner made a note in her notebook. A few neighbors came up to me and said they had no idea the enforcement was so aggressive. One of them said he had received a violation notice for a lawn issue and paid it without questioning because he assumed it was legitimate. I told him he could request a refund if the fine was issued without board approval. He looked interested. The meeting reconvened. The board president said the board had discussed the matter and agreed to review the enforcement procedures. He said the board would vote on whether to void the disputed fines at the next meeting. Laura interrupted. She said the fines were already in collections. The board president looked confused. He asked when the fines went to collections. Laura said 2 days ago. The board president asked why he was not notified. Laura said it was part of her administrative duties. The board member who had asked for the log said that was not correct. He said the bylaws required board approval before sending any account to collections. Laura said that was a recent change and she had not been informed. The board member said the bylaws had not changed in 5 years. The room erupted. Neighbors started talking over each other. Someone asked if the HOA was stealing money. Someone else asked if Laura had been issuing fake fines. The board president banged the gavel and called for order. Laura stood and said she was being attacked and she would not tolerate it. She said the board could handle enforcement themselves if they did not trust her. She grabbed her portable folding sign stand and walked toward the door. The board president told her to sit down. She ignored him and kept walking. She reached the door and turned back. She said, "We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." Then she left. The board president looked stunned. The board member who had been pushing for the log said he moved to suspend Laura's enforcement authority pending an audit. Another board member seconded. The president called for a vote. 4 in favor, 1 abstention. The motion passed. Karen tries to interrupt and the meeting votes anyway. The board president said he would contact the management company and request a full audit of the enforcement log, the vendor contracts, and the collections account. He said the board would reconvene in 2 weeks to review the findings. He asked if I had anything else to add. I said I wanted the disputed fines removed from my account immediately. He said he would work with the management company to make it happen. I thanked him and sat down. After the meeting, the investigator approached me in the parking lot. She introduced herself and said she was impressed with how I had documented everything. She said the state would be opening a formal investigation into the HOA's practices. She said I should expect a follow-up call within the week. I thanked her. She handed me her card and left. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, letting it all sink in. A few neighbors came over and congratulated me. One of them said I had done what the previous owner could not. I said I just followed the rules. He laughed and said that was exactly what Laura hated. The next morning, I woke up to a text from the board president. He said the management company had reviewed my account and removed all disputed fines. He said the board had also terminated the vendor contract with the tow company pending a review of the authorization process. That was a vendor termination that cuts off Karen's favorite enforcement muscle. He said Laura had submitted her resignation from the board effective immediately. I replied with a thank you and saved the text. 2 weeks later, the board held the follow-up meeting. The audit results were damning. The enforcement log showed that Laura had issued over 200 violation notices in the past year. Only 30 of them had been reviewed by the board. The rest were issued unilaterally. The vendor contract with the tow company included a commission structure that paid Laura a percentage of every tow fee. The collections account showed that Laura had sent 12 homeowner accounts to collections without board approval. 3 of those accounts had already been settled, and the homeowners had no idea they could dispute the charges. The board president read the findings aloud. The room was packed. At least 40 people had shown up. When he finished, he said the board would be implementing new enforcement procedures effective immediately. All violation notices would require board review before being issued. All fines over $25 would require a vote. All vendor contracts would be posted on the HOA portal for homeowner review. The board would also be hiring an independent auditor to review the financial records and ensure no other irregularities existed. The HOA removes the enforcement action and voids the ledger entry for all disputed fines issued without board approval. Then he said one more thing. He said Laura had been asked to appear at the meeting to address the findings. She had declined. He said the board had given her the option to resign quietly or face a formal removal vote. She had chosen to resign, but the board had a motion on the floor to require a public apology as a condition of her resignation. The motion passed. Karen is forced to apologize on the record in front of the room. The board president read her written apology aloud. It was 2 sentences. It said she regretted any confusion caused by her enforcement actions and she wished the HOA well. The room was silent. A few people shook their heads. Someone muttered that was not an apology. The board president said it was what they had and the matter was closed. After the meeting, I went home and backed up all my evidence one more time. I kept copies on 3 separate drives just in case. A week later, I got a call from the State Consumer Protection Office. They said the investigation was complete and the HOA had agreed to a settlement. The settlement required the HOA to refund all improperly issued fines, pay a penalty to the state, and implement new governance training for the board. The state would also be monitoring the HOA for the next 2 years. The investigator said my documentation had been critical to the case. She said without the police incident number and the timeline, they would not have had enough to proceed. I thanked her and hung up. The next day, I ran into Marcus at the mailbox cluster. He asked how the meeting went. I gave him the short version. He laughed and said he wished he had done the same thing 2 years ago. He said he was glad someone finally stood up to Laura. I told him about the state investigation and the settlement. He said he might file a complaint about his own fines. I gave him Diane's number at the city clerk's office. He thanked me and walked back to his house. That weekend, I got a message from the previous owner. He said he had heard through the grapevine what happened. He said he was glad someone finally caught Laura. He said he wished he had kept better records. I told him his police incident number was the key to the whole case. He said he was happy it helped. He asked if I was planning to stay in the neighborhood. I said yes. The rent was still reasonable, and the new board seemed committed to fixing the problems. He said good luck and signed off. A month later, the HOA held elections. Half the board turned over. The new members ran on a transparency platform. They posted the meeting minutes online within 48 hours of every meeting. They created a public enforcement log that showed every violation notice issued, who issued it, and whether it was approved by the board. They also eliminated the laminated notice template Laura had been using. All notices now came on official HOA letterhead with a tracking number and a dispute process printed at the bottom. No more handwritten blanks, no more mystery fines. I kept my evidence binder on a shelf in my office. I did not think I would need it again, but I was not taking chances. Every few weeks I checked the HOA portal to make sure the enforcement log was still being updated. It was. The new board was following the rules. The neighborhood felt different. People were friendlier. The group chat was quieter. No more enforcement posts, no more shaming. Just normal neighborhood stuff like lost pets and yard sale announcements. I ran into Diane at the grocery store one afternoon. She asked how everything turned out. I told her the HOA settled and Laura resigned. She smiled and said she was glad I followed through. She said most people give up when the HOA fights back. I said I did not have a choice. The lien threat could have ruined my refinance. She said I did the right thing. I thanked her for the help. She said that was her job. A few months later, I got a letter from the State Consumer Protection Office. It said the HOA had completed its governance training and the penalty had been paid in full. It said the monitoring period would continue for another 1.5 years. It said if I had any further concerns, I should contact the investigator. I filed the letter with my evidence binder and moved on. The neighborhood settled into a new normal. The new board was cautious. They asked for homeowner input before making decisions. They posted budget drafts for review. They even held a town hall to discuss the enforcement changes. About 30 people showed up. Most of them just wanted to know the rules. A few people shared stories about past violations they had paid without questioning. The board said anyone who felt they had been wrongly fined could request a review. 3 people filed requests. All 3 were approved for refunds. I did not hear from Laura again. I heard through neighbors that she moved to a different neighborhood. Someone said she was trying to get elected to that HOA board. I did not follow up. It was not my problem anymore. I had my evidence. I had my refund. I had my clean account. That was enough. One afternoon, I got a knock on my door. It was a woman from 3 houses down. She said she had heard I was the one who took down Laura. I said I just asked for records. She laughed and said it was more than that. She said she had been too scared to fight back when Laura issued her a fine for a holiday decoration. She said she paid it and took the decoration down. She said she wished she had known she could dispute it. I told her the new board had a dispute process. She said it was too late for her, but she was glad it was there for other people. I said it was never too late. She could still file a refund request. She said she would think about it. She thanked me and left. That conversation stuck with me. I realized how many people had paid fines they should not have, how many people were too scared to fight back, how many people just assumed the HOA had the authority because someone in a position said so. I thought about the previous owner. I thought about Marcus. I thought about the woman with the holiday decoration. I thought about all the people who did not have time or energy or documentation to fight. I thought about how close I came to being one of them. I decided to write everything down. I typed up the full timeline. I included every email, every notice, every phone call, every meeting. I included the police incident number, the doorbell footage, the tow authorization, the group chat screenshots, the audit findings, the settlement letter, and the final refund confirmation. I saved it as a PDF and uploaded it to a shared drive. Then I posted a link in the neighborhood group chat. I said anyone who wanted to know what happened could read the full story. I said I was happy to answer questions. The responses came fast. 12 people messaged me privately. Most of them said they had no idea the enforcement was that bad. A few said they had suspected but did not want to get involved. One person said they were planning to move because of an ongoing dispute with Laura. I told them Laura was gone and the new board was different. They said they would give it a chance. The next week, I got a message from a reporter at the local paper. She said she was writing a story about HOA abuses and she wanted to interview me. I hesitated. I did not want to be the face of the story. I told her I would think about it. She said she understood and gave me her contact info. I talked to Diane about it. She said it was up to me, but stories like mine could help other people dealing with the same thing. I thought about it for a few days. Then I called the reporter back. I said I would do the interview, but I wanted to remain anonymous. She agreed. The story ran 2 weeks later. It was front page of the local section. The headline was HOA Vendor Coordinator Resigns After State Investigation. The story included quotes from the board president, the state investigator, and me. My quotes were attributed to an anonymous homeowner. The story laid out the timeline, the fake fines, the unauthorized tows, the commission structure with the tow company, the settlement, the reforms. The reporter did a good job. She did not sensationalize, she just presented the facts. The story got picked up by a regional news site, then a state-level consumer advocacy blog, then a national HOA reform forum. Within a week, it had been shared hundreds of times. I got messages from people in other states. They said they were dealing with similar situations. They asked for advice. I sent them the timeline template I had used. I sent them Diane's contact info at the city clerk's office. I sent them links to the state HOA statute and the consumer protection complaint form. I told them to document everything. I told them not to give up. I told them the rules were on their side if they could prove it. A few months later, I got an email from a law firm in another state. They said they were representing a group of homeowners in an HOA fraud case. They said they had read the news story and wanted to know if I would be willing to consult on their case. They said they would pay me for my time. I said I was not an expert. They said I had more real-world experience than most experts. I thought about it. Then I agreed. I spent a weekend on the phone with their paralegal walking through my timeline and explaining how I had gathered the evidence. They said it was incredibly helpful. They sent me a check for $500. I was shocked. I had not expected to get paid. I deposited the check and used it to upgrade my cloud storage plan. I figured I might need the space if I kept helping people. The next year was quiet. I paid my rent on time. I kept my grass cut. I did not get any violation notices. The new board was doing a good job. They posted quarterly budget reports. They held town halls every few months. They even created a homeowner advisory committee to review enforcement decisions before they were issued. I was asked to join. I declined. I had done my part. I wanted to move on. But the requests kept coming. I got emails from homeowners in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, Florida, Texas. They all had similar stories: unauthorized fines, fake violations, aggressive enforcement, missing records. I answered as many as I could. I sent templates, I sent links, I sent encouragement. I told them to stay calm, document everything, and follow the rules. I told them the system worked if they were patient and persistent. Most of them thanked me and said they would try. A few wrote back later to say they had won their cases. Those messages made it worth it. One afternoon, I got a voicemail from a number I did not recognize. It was Laura. She said she wanted to talk. She said she had been treated unfairly and she wanted to set the record straight. She said she had dedicated years to the HOA and the board had thrown her under the bus. She said I had ruined her reputation and she wanted an apology. I did not call her back. I saved the voicemail and added it to the evidence folder just in case. A week later, she called again. This time, she said she was considering legal action. She said I had defamed her by sharing the timeline. She said she had consulted with an attorney. I did not call her back. I forwarded the voicemail to the state investigator and asked if it was considered retaliation. The investigator said it might be. She said she would follow up. I never heard from Laura again after that. The second year was even quieter. The HOA monitoring period ended. The state closed the case. The board held another election and kept most of the new members. The reforms stuck. The enforcement log stayed public. The dispute process stayed in place. The neighborhood felt normal. People moved in. People moved out. Life went on. I got a message from the previous owner one last time. He said he had been following the news coverage and he wanted to thank me. He said knowing that Laura was held accountable made the whole experience feel less pointless. He said he wished he had fought harder, but he was glad someone did. I told him his police incident number was the key. Without it, I would not have had proof of the pattern. He said he was glad it helped. He said he had moved on and was happy in his new place. He said he hoped I stayed safe and kept fighting the good fight. I told him I was done fighting. I just wanted a quiet life. He laughed and said that was fair. We signed off. I kept the evidence binder on the shelf. I checked the HOA portal every few months to make sure the reforms were still in place. They were. The new board published meeting minutes within 48 hours. The enforcement log showed every violation issued. The vendor contracts were posted online. The dispute process was still active. Everything I fought for was still there. That was enough. I ran into the board president at the hardware store a few months later. He asked how I was doing. I said I was good. He said the board was grateful for what I did. He said the reforms had made the HOA more transparent and accountable. He said a few other neighborhoods had reached out asking how they could implement similar changes. I told him that was great. He said he was planning to run for another term. He asked if I would consider joining the board. I said no, I had done my part. I just wanted to live my life. He laughed and said he understood. He said the offer stood if I changed my mind. I thanked him and left. A year later, I refinanced. The process was smooth. No liens, no surprises. The appraiser noted that the neighborhood was well maintained, and the HOA had a solid reputation for transparency. I laughed when I read that. A year and a half earlier, the same HOA was threatening to destroy my credit. Now it was boosting my property value. I closed on the refinance and used the savings to pay down debt. Life got easier. I kept helping people when I could. I answered emails. I shared templates. I walked people through the process. I told them the same thing every time: document everything. Stay calm, follow the rules, and do not give up. Most of them listened. A few did not. But enough did that it felt like progress. I heard from people who won their cases. I heard from people who got refunds. I heard from people who forced their boards to change. Every story was different, but the outcome was the same. The system worked if you pushed hard enough. One day, I got a message from someone asking if I had ever thought about writing a book. I said no. They said I should. They said my story could help thousands of people. I said I was not a writer. They said I did not need to be. I just needed to tell the truth. I thought about it. Then I said maybe someday. They said they hoped I would. I filed the message and moved on. I still check the HOA portal every few months. The reforms are still in place. The enforcement log is still public. The dispute process is still active. The board still publishes meeting minutes on time. The neighborhood is still quiet. People come and go. The rules are enforced, but fairly now. No more surprise fines. No more unauthorized TOWs. No more missing records. Just a normal HOA doing normal things. I kept the evidence binder on the shelf. I did not think I would ever need it again, but it was there just in case. A reminder of what happened. A reminder of what I fought for. A reminder that the rules work if you follow them. A reminder that no one is above the law, not even the people who enforce it. Looking back, I realized how close I came to losing. If I had not asked Marcus about the previous owner, if I had not called Diane at the city clerk's office, if I had not saved every email, every notice, every screenshot, if I had not found the police incident number, if I had not stayed calm when Laura tried to bait me into yelling, if I had not documented the doorbell footage, if I had not called the deputy when the tow truck showed up, if I had not presented the evidence at the meeting, if I had not filed the state complaint. Any one of those things could have gone differently and I would have lost. But I did not lose. I won. Not because I was smarter or tougher or luckier. I won because I followed the rules. I documented everything. I stayed calm. I asked for help. I did not give up. And the system worked. It took time, it took effort, it took patience, but it worked. That was the lesson I tried to share with everyone who reached out. The system is not broken. It is just slow and complicated and designed to favor the people who know how to use it. But if you learn the rules, if you gather the evidence, if you stay persistent, you can win. You can force accountability. You can change the outcome. You can make the system work for you instead of against you. I thought about Laura sometimes. I wondered if she learned anything. I wondered if she regretted what she did. I wondered if she ever thought about the people she hurt. I doubted it. People like Laura do not see themselves as the villain. They see themselves as the enforcer, the rule keeper, the guardian of order. They convince themselves that the rules are more important than the people they hurt. They convince themselves that the ends justify the means. They never admit they were wrong. They just move on and find another place to enforce another set of rules. But I did not waste energy thinking about her. She was gone. The neighborhood was better. The rules were fair. The board was transparent. The enforcement was accountable. That was what mattered. Not revenge, not punishment, just accountability, just fairness. Just a neighborhood where people could live without fear of arbitrary fines and fake violations and missing records. The final piece came a few months later. I got a letter from the State Consumer Protection Office. It said the monitoring period was officially over. It said the HOA had complied with all settlement terms. It said the case was closed. It said if I had any further concerns, I could file a new complaint. I filed the letter with the evidence binder and closed the folder. I walked outside and looked at the neighborhood. It was a normal suburban street, well-maintained lawns, quiet houses, a few kids riding bikes, a neighbor walking a dog. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, just a place where people lived. That was all I ever wanted, a quiet place to live without drama, without threats, without fear. I got it. It took a year and a half and 100 hours of documentation and a state investigation and a board overhaul, but I got it. I thought about all the people who reached out, all the people fighting their own battles, all the people dealing with their own loris. I hoped they won. I hope they documented everything. I hope they stayed calm. I hope they followed the rules. I hope the system worked for them the way it worked for me. I could not help all of them, but I could help some, and that was enough. I went back inside and sat down at my desk. I opened the evidence folder one last time. I scrolled through the timeline, the emails, the notices, the screenshots, the police report, the tow authorization, the meeting minutes, the audit findings, the settlement letter, the refund confirmation, the case closure. It was all there, every piece, every moment, every step. The proof that the system worked, the proof that the rules mattered, the proof that no one was above accountability. I closed the folder and leaned back. It was over. The fight was done. The neighborhood was safe. The reforms were in place. The people were protected. That was all that mattered. Not revenge, not glory, just fairness, just rules that worked, just a place where people could live without fear. I am glad you tuned in.